The city was breathing frost that evening. Chicago in early winter wasn't kind to anyone, but especially not to those with nowhere to go. Streetlights buzzed overhead, casting broken shadows over cracked sidewalks. Steam curled up from manhole covers like ghosts slipping into the night. Near the corner of East Monroe and Wabash, a little girl sat cross-legged on a piece of flattened cardboard. Her cheeks were pink from the cold, her fingers red around the edges. She wasn't asking for much, just playing a few soft notes on an old harmonica, its silver sides dulled with time. Next to her, a large German shepherd sat upright, eyes alert, his body still. His name was Ranger. He didn't bark, didn't beg. He watched the world pass by with the patience of someone who had seen too much already. Anyone who walked too close met his gaze, not aggressive, but unshakably present, like he was always ready to protect the girl beside him, no matter what. That girl was Emily, though everyone just called her Emily. She was 10, but she had the stillness of someone older, not because she was wise, but because she learned that silence could keep you safe. Her little brother Ben lay curled beside her under a threadbare blanket. He coughed once, a dry sound that pulled at her attention mid-note, but she kept playing, soft, steady, like it might somehow keep the cold from creeping in further. And across the street, inside the back seat of a black town car, someone was watching. Charles Ashford hadn't meant to stop. He rarely looked out the window at all anymore, but something caught his eye, or someone. He asked his driver to slow down. "There, that girl and the dog. Pull over." The car eased to the curb. Ashford stepped out, his long coat sweeping behind him, the tailored wool shielding him from the bite of the air. He stood still, watching from a short distance. He didn't know what made him pause. Maybe it was the way the dog stayed so close. Maybe it was the way the girl cradled the harmonica like it was the last beautiful thing she owned. But mostly it was the dog. Ranger reminded him of Milo. Not how Milo looked in his final days, old and slow, but how Milo had been as a pup, back when Ashford was still young and reckless, and trying to prove something to the world. Back when things were lighter. Same eyes, same stance, same unwavering focus. Ashford's chest tightened, a feeling he didn't like. He didn't believe in fate or signs, but this felt like something he hadn't seen in a long, long time. He stepped closer, the gravel crunching under his leather shoes. Emily stopped playing. Ranger's ears twitched, and he shifted, subtly moving between the man and the girl. Ashford noticed. "Good dog," he murmured. Emily looked up at him, unsure whether to speak. She didn't smile, just held his gaze like someone who had learned that adults rarely meant kindness. "May I ask his name?" Ashford said. Emily glanced at Ranger, then back. "Ranger. Strong name." "He is." There was a pause. One of those quiet moments where time doesn't stop, just listens. "I had a dog once," Ashford said. "When I was younger, looked a lot like him." Emily didn't respond. She didn't need to. The way her hand rested gently on Ranger's back said more than words could. Ashford studied them a moment longer, then nodded to himself as if making a decision. "I'd like to buy him." Emily blinked. "He's not for sale. I'd pay well." She didn't hesitate. "Doesn't matter." He tilted his head, genuinely surprised. "Everything has a price." She looked at Ranger, then at Ben, still curled beneath the blanket. Her voice was soft, but steady. "Not him." Ashford didn't argue, not yet. He only looked at the trio again, the girl, the boy, and the dog, like pieces of a puzzle he couldn't quite figure out. Then he turned and walked back to the car. As the vehicle pulled away, Emily lifted the harmonica again. Her fingers trembled slightly, but the melody returned, soft, persistent, The kind of sound that didn't beg, only hoped someone might one day truly listen. And Ashford from the back seat finally did. 2 days passed. The weather grew colder. The wind had sharpened, slicing through the alleys like it carried something personal. Emily and Ben stayed huddled beneath a sheet of cardboard behind an old bakery that let them sit near the back door, as long as they left before sunrise. Ranger never strayed far. He'd lie between the two children at night, his body curled tightly to trap warmth, ears always twitching at the slightest sound. Emily knew that without him, they wouldn't have lasted half this long. It was just before noon when the black car returned. Same make, same gleaming polish, same quiet presence as it rolled to a stop at the end of the block. Emily recognized it instantly. Her fingers froze on the harmonica she was cleaning with the corner of her sleeve. Ben looked up from a shared packet of crackers, crumbs clinging to his lips. The back door opened. Charles Ashford stepped out, dressed in a deep navy coat, his scarf perfectly folded. This time, he didn't approach right away. He stood still for a moment, watching them as if confirming something, a choice already made. Then he walked forward. Ranger rose to his feet, stiff but silent. Emily placed a calming hand on his back. Ashford stopped a few steps away, removing a pair of leather gloves slowly. "I've come to make another offer," he said. Emily didn't speak. Ashford pulled a small envelope from his coat pocket. He extended it. $50,000. Ben's eyes widened. He sat up straighter, looking between the envelope and his sister. "Emily, that's a lot." She didn't move. "Why do you want him so much?" Ashford's voice softened, just slightly. "Because he reminds me of someone I loved, someone I lost, and because no other dog has looked at me like that in 20 years. Emily's fingers gripped the edge of her coat. "You can't just buy that." "No," Ashford said, "but I can try." Ben tugged gently at her sleeve. "We could get a place, Emily, a real one. You could go to school again." Emily looked down at him. His face was pale, cheeks sunken a little more each week. There was always a tremble in his hands now when he reached for food. Then she turned to Ranger. He was watching Ashford, head tilted, calm. Not aggressive, not even wary, just waiting, as if sensing something was shifting. "I'm sorry," Emily said finally, her voice barely above the wind, "but he's not for sale." Ashford looked at her longer this time. He didn't push, didn't plead. He simply said, "You're a brave girl." Then he turned and walked away. As the car door shut, Emily held onto Ranger's fur and looked down at her brother. "I'm not going to lose him too," she said softly. Ben didn't respond. He just leaned his head against her shoulder. And though the envelope never left Ashford's pocket, the question it carried stayed behind, curling through the alleys, lingering in the cold. How long can love hold out against everything else? 3 more nights passed. The cold had grown sharper, no longer something you endured, but something you braced against. Emily had wrapped Ben in every piece of clothing they owned, leaving herself with just a sweater and the thin denim of her jacket. Ranger had taken to curling around them even tighter, his thick coat their only real insulation from the wind. They hadn't made much in days. The harmonica no longer drew the same soft looks from strangers, and Emily's fingers were too numb to play for long. Ben's cough was getting worse. He was sleeping more than usual. Too much, Emily thought. Too deeply. That morning, the town car came again. But this time, Charles Ashford wasn't in the back seat. A tall man in a dark gray coat stepped out instead. His movements were brisk, his eyes trained, like someone used to being efficient and being listened to. He approached Emily without preamble. "Mr. Ashford would like to make a final offer." Emily didn't rise. She stayed seated, Ben beside her, half asleep. Ranger stood between them and the man like a wall. The assistant reached into his coat and pulled out a small black folder. He opened it, turned it around, and held it up. The number inside was so large it didn't look real. $2 million. Emily's breath caught. The man's voice was calm. Cash, available immediately, no conditions. For a moment, there was only the sound of traffic in the distance. A siren wailed faintly somewhere across the river. Emily stared at the number, then at her brother, then at Ranger. Ben slowly sat up. "Emily," he whispered, "that could change everything." "I know. We could eat every day. You could go back to school. I could see a doctor. We could stop hiding." His voice cracked on the last word. Emily looked down at her lap. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them together to still them. The assistant waited, still holding the folder, expression unreadable. Ranger moved a little closer, nudging her elbow gently with his nose. It wasn't a demand, just presence. Emily closed her eyes. She thought of every night they'd spent huddled behind dumpsters, every time she'd gone without food so Ben could eat. She thought of waking up to Ranger licking the frost from her cheeks. She thought of how he stood guard while she slept, how he never once left their side, not even when offered kindness from strangers or a scrap of food across the street. And yet, $2 million, enough to keep Ben safe for years, enough to build a future out of nothing. Emily opened her eyes again. I need time," she whispered. The man nodded. "We'll return tomorrow, first light." He handed her a card with a phone number. No names, just numbers. Then he turned, walked back to the car, and left. That night, Emily didn't play the harmonica. She just sat in silence, one hand on Ranger's fur, the other holding the card, staring at it like it might answer the question tearing her apart. What's the price of choosing someone you love over someone you can save? The wind howled that night. It crept beneath their thin blankets, slicing through layers of clothes like they weren't even there. Ben's breathing had grown shallow. Each exhale came with a faint whistle, and Emily could feel how hot his forehead had become, even in the freezing air. She lay beside him, wide awake, her eyes fixed on the card still clutched in her hand. The numbers were starting to fade from the edges, worn down by her fingers, by indecision. Ranger was curled at her other side. He'd been still all evening, but not asleep. Emily could tell. His ears twitched at every passing sound, his body tense in the way dogs get when they know something is coming. But they don't yet know what. She ran her hands slowly along his back. He leaned into her touch without moving. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. "I don't want to lose you." Ben stirred beside her. He didn't open his eyes, but he mumbled through chapped lips. "It's okay, Emily. If you have to, I'll still love you." Those words broke something loose in her chest. She sat up, holding her breath like it might keep her from crying. The city lights blinked in the distance, hazy through the tears she refused to let fall. They didn't have time anymore. Ben needed warmth, medicine, a bed that didn't rest on concrete. And she didn't matter. Not compared to him, not compared to his future. At sunrise, the car came back. Same black vehicle, same man in the gray coat. This time, Emily was already standing, arms wrapped tightly around herself, eyes tired but resolved. The assistant stepped forward, folder in hand. "Have you decided?" Emily looked down at Ranger. He was sitting next to Ben, tail swishing once against the ground. His eyes were soft, waiting for her cue like he always did, as if he'd follow her no matter what. She knelt beside him, held his face gently in both hands, pressed her forehead to his. "I love you," she said into his fur. "I hope you'll understand someday." Ranger didn't move. He just stayed still, heart beating fast beneath her fingers. She stood, nodded once. The man signaled the driver. A door opened. Ranger hesitated at first. One paw lifted, uncertain. then stepped forward when Emily softly whispered, "Go on." He climbed inside. The door shut with a dull, final click. Ben stood behind her now, still wrapped in a blanket, eyes glassy. "Did we do the right thing?" he asked. Emily didn't answer. Her throat was too tight. She just took his hand in hers and held on. As the car pulled away, Ranger's face appeared briefly in the window, watching, waiting, not barking, just confused. And Emily, for the first time in weeks, had no melody left in her fingers, no music, no words, only silence. The first night without Ranger was the quietest Emily had ever known. Even Ben, finally sleeping in a real bed in the corner of a small motel room, couldn't fill the silence. There was no soft shuffle of paws circling before lying down. No steady breathing by her side. No warmth curling against her legs. Just the dull hum of an old radiator and the sound of city traffic far below. Emily stared at the ceiling. The sheets smelled like bleach and old cotton. The pillow was too soft. Her arms wrapped around herself out of habit, as if searching for something that wasn't there. She'd thought things would feel different, better. They had food now. Ben was already looking stronger, his cough quieter, his cheeks less pale. There was a roof overhead, running water, warmth. But something was missing, something so large, so vital, that none of it felt real. Meanwhile, across the city, Ranger lay in a room bigger than anywhere he had ever slept before. His new bed was plush and clean. His water bowl gleamed in the light from an antique chandelier. The staff at Charles Ashford's estate treated him gently, offered him treats, took him for quiet walks around the garden. But Ranger didn't wag his tail. He didn't eat much, didn't play, didn't bark. He just lay near the front door, always the same spot, facing the outside, waiting. Ashford noticed. The man stood at the end of the hallway one morning, watching the dog that reminded him so much of Milo. He had expected Ranger to adjust slowly, maybe even resist at first. But this wasn't resistance. This was heartbreak. He asked one of the caretakers, "Has he gone out with you?" "Only when we lead him. He doesn't want to leave the door. And meals. He barely touches them." Ashford didn't say anything else, just nodded, then turned away. In the motel, Emily placed a small, uneaten sandwich back on the dresser. She picked up her harmonica, held it for a moment, then set it down again. The notes didn't come. Ben watched her. "You can play if you want," he said gently. "I don't want to," she replied. A pause. "I miss him." "I know," Ben whispered. "Me too." And then he said the one thing she hadn't expected to hear. "He misses us more." Emily didn't cry, but something inside her, the part that had stayed strong for Ben's sake, started to fracture. Because it was true. All of it was true. They had a better life now, safer, warmer, easier, but none of it felt whole. And in the places they now slept, one in soft linen, the other on polished hardwood, neither girl nor dog could rest. Because no matter what money it bought, it couldn't fill the space where family used to be. 1 week. That's how long it had been since Ranger left. 7 mornings of waking up warm, but not whole. 7 nights of silent dinners, of harmonicas untouched, of dreams where paws padded across the motel floor, only for Emily to wake up alone. The envelope of money sat folded beneath the mattress. She hadn't touched it, not beyond paying for the motel and 2 meals a day. Something about spending it made her stomach twist, like every dollar used pushed Ranger farther away. Ben had noticed. "You haven't bought anything for yourself," he said one morning, sitting cross-legged on the bed with a cup of soup between his hands. "Not clothes, not even socks." Emily shrugged, tying her shoelaces, the same ones with the broken tips and knotted holes. "I don't want anything," she said. Ben looked down. Except him. Emily didn't reply. Later that day, she started asking questions. Not big ones. Not yet. Just small things. Where people walk dogs this time of year. If anyone knew where a big mansion with a German shepherd was. Some looked at her strangely. Others shrugged. But one woman, an older lady with bags of laundry, pointed north. Big house out by the lake, she said. Real fancy. Heard the man who owns it never smiles. Except maybe once. Last week, someone said they saw him with a dog. That was enough. That night, Emily opened the envelope. She counted out exactly $2 million. Then she wrapped it in an old scarf, double knotted it, and slipped it into her backpack. The rest of the money, a handful of bills they'd earned from her part-time cleaning shifts, she tucked into Ben's jacket. Are we going somewhere? Ben asked, watching her. She nodded. Back for him? Back for us. Ben didn't question it. He just got up, zipped his coat, and followed her. They walked most of the way. Took a bus for the final stretch. Ben curled beside her, Emily staring out the window at growing trees and wide driveways. By the time they reached the gates of the Ashford estate, dusk had settled. The air was cold again, but not sharp like before. This time, it was a clean cold, a new cold, the kind that carried change. They stood there, two children in hand-me-down jackets, holding nothing but a bag of money and the weight of a mistake. And when the security camera shifted toward them, Emily looked straight into the lens and said, My name is Emily. I'm here to bring Ranger home. The gate didn't open at first. Emily stood with her hand resting on the cold iron bars, backpack slung tightly over one shoulder. Ben stood close beside her, clutching the frayed end of her jacket, his breath puffed out in small clouds. Neither of them said anything. A voice crackled from the intercom. This is private property. Emily leaned closer. I know. My name is Emily. I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want to speak to Mr. Ashford, please. There was silence. Then, he doesn't take visitors. She took a breath. Steady. He'll want to take this one. A pause, then a quiet click. The gates began to open, slowly, reluctantly, like they weren't quite sure if they should. A long gravel driveway stretched ahead, flanked by towering trees and a house so large it looked like something out of a storybook. But cold, distant, all windows and stone. A guard met them halfway. He didn't smile, but he didn't stop them either. Come on, he said simply and turned. Inside the estate, the warmth was almost too much. Emily's cheeks burned from the contrast. Ben looked around with wide eyes but didn't speak. He stayed close. They were led into a wide sitting room. Fire crackling, heavy bookshelves, old paintings, the kind of place where noise didn't belong. Then he entered, Charles Ashford. He looked the same, precise, composed. But there was something different in his eyes. Less distance, more weight. He looked at Emily for a long moment, then at Ben, then at the backpack. You came back, he said. Emily nodded. Yes. He gestured toward the nearest chair. Sit, if you'd like. She stayed standing. Her voice was calm, but her hands clutched the straps of her bag like they were the only thing keeping her upright. I brought the money, she said. All of it. I haven't used it. I'd like to return it and take Ranger back. Ashford didn't speak at first. He walked slowly to the fireplace, placed one hand on the mantel, as if the warmth there steadied him. When he turned back, his expression was unreadable. Not cold, just deeply considering. Why? He asked. Emily blinked. Because I made a mistake. Ashford's eyes narrowed slightly. You made a decision. I made a decision with my head, she replied, but not with my heart. He crossed his arms. You sold him to save your brother. Yes, Emily said softly, but I never stopped loving him, and he never stopped waiting for me. A silence passed between them. Ben stepped forward then, small, unsure, and added, "He's not just a dog. He's our family." Ashford looked at the boy for a long time. Something flickered behind his eyes. Not pity, something older. He looked away. "I tried," he said finally, "to give him a good life. He has a warm bed, fresh food, caretakers who adore him." "But he's not happy," Emily said. That hit deeper than she expected. Ashford lowered his gaze. "No," he admitted, "he's not." The room held its breath. Then Emily stepped forward, unzipping the backpack. She placed the bundled scarf carefully on the nearest table. It landed with a quiet thump, heavier than its size would suggest. "I'm not asking for charity," she said. "I'm not asking for sympathy. Just a second chance." Ashford looked at the scarf, then at her. "You think love is enough?" he asked. She didn't hesitate. "I think it's the only thing that ever really was." For the first time since she'd met him, Charles Ashford smiled. Not fully, not brightly, but enough. Charles Ashford didn't say a word as he stepped out of the room. He didn't need to. The moment the door closed behind him, the house felt heavier, like the walls themselves were waiting. Emily sat down slowly, hands folded in her lap. Ben sat beside her, legs swinging just above the floor, nervous but hopeful. The scarf-wrapped bundle of money remained untouched on the table. A few minutes passed. Then they heard it. Paw steps. Not hurried, not light. Careful, hesitant, familiar. The door opened again, and Ranger walked in. At first, he didn't run. He stood in the doorway, unsure, head tilted slightly like he didn't quite believe what he was seeing. His eyes darted between Ashford, standing just behind him, and the girl across the room who smelled like cold air and home. Then Emily whispered, barely audible, "Hey, boy." That was all it took. Ranger's ears perked, his body tensed, and then he ran, straight across the room, claws slipping slightly on the polished floor. Emily dropped to her knees just in time to catch him as his body collided with hers in a rush of fur and warmth and trembling limbs. He whined, high and desperate, the kind of sound only made by something that had been waiting too long to feel whole again. Emily buried her face in his neck, arms locked around him. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have let you go." Ranger licked her cheek, then licked it again, his tail thudding against the floor like a heartbeat. Ashford stood in the doorway, watching. He hadn't expected it to hit him like this. The sheer force of something so simple. But the sight of them, girl and dog, holding on like nothing else existed, unmade something inside him that had been hard for too long. Ben approached slowly, dropping to one knee and resting his hand gently on Ranger's back. "Hey, buddy," he said, his voice breaking. "We missed you." Ranger nudged him gently, then pressed against both of them, as if trying to wrap himself around his little family all at once. Ashford cleared his throat. Emily stood, one hand still resting on Ranger's back. She looked at the older man with something close to gratitude, but not dependence, not begging, just quiet thanks. "I can leave the money," she said. "I'll work to repay the rest." Ashford shook his head. "I don't want the money," he said. She blinked. "But you already paid," he said gently, "with something far more valuable." He stepped farther into the room, looking down at Ranger, then at the children. His voice softened. "You reminded me of something I forgot, that not everything worth having can be bought. Not loyalty, not love, not what makes us human." Emily didn't know what to say, but then Ashford smiled, a real one this time, faint but alive. "I've decided to keep the money," he continued, "but not for myself." He walked toward the table and picked up the scarf-wrapped bundle. "I'm going to use this, and more. To build something. A place for kids like you, who've had to carry too much too soon. A place where no one has to choose between love and survival. He looked at Emily, and for the first time, she saw not a billionaire, but a man who had also lost something once, and finally found a reason to open the door again. "I'm calling it Emily's shelter," he said. The words hung in the air like light. And for the first time since this all began, Emily felt warm, not because of heat, not because of blankets, but because she had found something bigger than comfort. She had found someone who finally understood what it meant to hold on and never let go again. The seasons changed quickly after that. Snow melted into soft grass. The wind lost its sharp edge. And for the first time in their lives, Emily and Ben stopped waking up afraid. They stayed at the Ashford estate for a while. At first just for rest, then longer, because it started to feel like home. Ranger followed Emily everywhere, his tail constantly wagging now, as if making up for all the days it hadn't. Charles Ashford kept his promise. Emily's shelter was built on a quiet corner of the city, filled with warmth, books, blankets, and always one open door. No locks, no judgment, just a chance. But his most unexpected decision wasn't building the shelter. It was the morning he called Emily and Ben into the study, cleared his throat, and simply said, "I'd like to become your guardian, if you'll have me." Ben's face lit up first. Emily stared for a moment, not sure if she'd heard him right. "You mean, you want to adopt us?" she asked. Ashford nodded. "Yes, you brought Ranger home, and somehow you brought me back too." Emily didn't cry, not fully, but her voice cracked as she whispered, "Okay." That night, Ranger curled up at the foot of a new bed, not in a shelter, not under a bridge, but in a real home. And for once, all three of them slept in peace. Because sometimes home isn't a place. It's the ones who stay, no matter what.